So let me start with one of my favorite quotes. It's actually a song, Adisi Nodu, Bilisi Nodu, Urudi Hogadu. So this roughly translates to, you play with it or you just, knock it down. It never falls. So this is actually a song from, a song that was picturized on the legendary Dr. Rajkumar, and it was penned by the great lyricist Mr. Chi Uday Shankar. So this particular line, it was actually about a tilting doll. I'm pretty sure a lot of us would have played with it as kids. So no matter how hard you try, you can't knock it down. So my, I've been in the film industry, Kannada film industry for the past 5 years now, and although my foray into films happened much earlier. So my parents say that the first movie that I've ever watched is Kamana Billu, which they took me to when I was 1 year old. And although the first film that I remember watching is Anand, which starred his son Dr. Shivraj Kumar, and that was when I was about 4 years old. So I'm an 80s kid, so I think 80s kids are the luckiest ones because we've seen this world before and after technology really took over. So being an 80s kid, I was fed on a staple diet of masala films. So you had these films where the hero was virtually indestructible, and in the end, the climax, all of his loved ones are tied up, and he comes and saves them. And if there are two heroines, one of them has to sacrifice her life, and if he has a sister, she meets a different fate, somewhere in the first half of the film. So, we grew up watching all these films, and I was born in Puttur. Although I was brought up in Mysore, most of my holidays were spent in Puttur. So we used to go to my village, and in front of my ancestral house there's a river. And me and my brother Nirup, who eventually went on to star in both of the films that I've directed. So we used to, play in this river, and the most favorite game was I used to dunk his head into the water, take it out, and then ask him, "Hey, Donim, boss yara? Who's your boss?" So that is how I started direction. And so the other thing that I was really interested in is music. I'm also a music director and a lyricist. So this was one of, thank you. So this was one of my passions. And so this started with, again, listening to a lot of songs. I think I've pretty much heard every album that released from 80s to early 2000s. And one of the things that I was very popular for within the family circles and friend circles was singing from, back then we used to have audio cassettes. So singing from A side to B side. So starting with the first song on A side to the last song on the B side. And that is including the prelude and the interlude. So, the one of the most famous albums during 80s was Premaloka in Kannada, and I used to start with and end on the B side with hey So I used to do this with pretty much every album that I had. I mean, we had a huge collection of audio cassettes which we've lost now. So this was my passion, but unfortunately for any middle class kid, the first thing that you have to achieve before you achieve any of your dreams is become an engineer or a doctor. So I chose engineering, probably because I thought that was easier than becoming a doctor. So, no offense. So then I joined engineering, and but while I was doing that, I did some background work on which was the best music college that I could join so that I can pursue my music career. And one of the colleges was Berklee College of Music. But pretty soon I realized that, the kind of fees that they were charging, it was impossible for me to afford if I did not work off campus, which was illegal with the work visa in the US. So that was one idea that never really worked out for me. Then I wrote a script when I was in engineering, because my dad at the time, a few years before, had directed a TV serial starring current superstar Mr. Sudeep. So I wanted my dad to direct a movie for Mr. Sudeep, and me and my brother Nirup, we co-wrote a script and titled it Yoda. So Sudeep was supposed to play a cop in that. And I presented the script to my dad, and dad heard the whole thing, and he said, "No, this is not good." So like any person who has half-baked knowledge, I was pretty disappointed, and I was more than disappointed. I was pretty sure that this was a super hit script. which I don't believe right now, but back then, yeah, that's what I thought. And I was pretty angry with my dad for saying that, this script wouldn't work. I'd even written songs for that. Then I told my dad, you know what, you make this film and trust me, this is going to be a hit. And he said, if you're so confident, why don't you direct it? Then I thought, I've written the script, and while writing the script, I could envision, all the scenes. So that's a good idea. I should direct it. But then why would somebody like Sudeep work with somebody who's not done anything? I've never stepped into a film set. So then I, kind of dropped the idea. And the next logical thing for me to do was find a job, which I really didn't want to, but that was the only option. Or, stay home and eat. That's it. There's pretty much nothing I could do apart from joining IT, which was the most dreaded thing for me at that point. So I joined IT. That's a funny story again because it was something that was totally unexpected. I went to this contest, a singing contest. So this was something like an Indian Idol for South Indian channels. So my friend kind of forced me to go there because she thought, I was pretty good at singing. And I went there, so I took a bus to Bangalore. And from there, I was supposed to take a bus to Kerpuram. And I met this girl in the bus stand who asked me if, the next bus went to Kerpuram. And I said, yeah, most likely. So she joined me, we both went there. She was also coming for the singing contest, the auditions. So I went there and I got down. She introduced me to one more friend of hers. Turned out both of them worked for Infosys. And so my turn came. I was supposed to go and sing on the stage. And all the way, while I was standing in the queue, I was thinking that, okay, I'll be singing the first round. Pretty easy. Go to the next round. Clear that. Finally, I'll be the finalist. I'll win. And then I'll start singing, and the next step would be I'll become a music director, because once you become a singer, it's pretty easy because you have the connections. So I walked onto the stage, but things were totally different, because if I'm awkward right now on stage, back then I was terrible. So I stood there, I started singing, I don't know what I sang, so I was out in the first round, and so were the other two people who were with me. And ironically, they suggested that I should send my resume to them so that they could forward it, and they would refer my name for an interview. So within a week's time, I got a call for an interview from Infosys, and within a month, I was working in Infosys. So I started working in Infosys. It was honestly speaking the last thing that I wanted to do, but I think that is one of the biggest turning points in my life, because I met a lot of wonderful people, I learned a lot of things, and more importantly, I met my wife in Infosys, who was also an employee there. And so my filmmaking technically started from there, because I did my very first short film for Infosys in an inter-DC competition. And I went on to do 2 more short films for them. And almost all of them won the first place in the inter-DC competitions. And so that kind of inspired me to keep going, and I kind of learned by doing the short films, because like I said, and I've never been to a film set, and all I've done is watch a lot of movies and make short films. But eventually my wife had to move to the US. She had an on-site assignment, and I had to follow like 3-4 months later. So the idea was I'll be in the US maybe for 6 months tops, then convince my wife to come back, because I had to start my movie. But didn't happen. I almost spent a decade there. And while I was there, I started getting restless. I still remember The Dark Knight Rises was releasing, and I'm attending a meeting, and I'm a huge Batman fan, huge Christopher Nolan fan. And in my head, throughout that 2-3 weeks before the release, the only thing that is playing in my head is so I'm sitting in a meeting one day. There are like 10 people in the room, and I'm just playing this in my head, and my friend is like, what are you doing? What happened? You're too loud. So, and I watched the movie, and I came out, and I'm like, what am I doing? I'm not achieving anything. So, I started working on the short film. So I met a person on my carpool whose wife was a sign language interpreter. So I thought that was a pretty interesting thing, and I decided to use that as my subject for my short film. And that is when Words happened. So I did a short film called Words. And luckily for me, the script was liked by a Hollywood actor, Russell Howard. So he had acted in quite a few Hollywood movies and a lot of TV series. The most significant of them was There Will Be Blood, where he played Daniel Day-Lewis's son, and that movie went on to win quite a few Oscars, including Best Actor for Daniel Day-Lewis. So he agreed to act in the film, and that kind of changed the whole project. So it became quite a prestigious project, and so the short film was done, and we kind of released it. I mean, we sent it to a lot of film festivals, and it got a tremendous response. We won quite a few awards. We played at a lot of film festivals across the world, and that kind of laid the platform for my feature film debut, which was Rangitaranga. It has to be, one of the easiest pitches ever, because I spoke to my producer over Skype, and I just narrated the first scene of the film, not the story of the film, just the first scene of the film, and I sang 2 songs from the film that I had written. And immediately after that, he said, "Yeah, let's do this film." And it was too good to be true, because I've been waiting to make a film for so long, and it was that easy, just a Skype call. But a lot of people kind of think that oh, he had it pretty easy because his first film was a blockbuster. But it's far from the truth, because when I first started the film, the first toughest decision that I had to make was that I had to leave my family behind. My daughter was 1 year old when I started the film, so I had to leave them behind in the US and come back to India and start working on this film. But the only thing that my wife told was, if you win, we'll come back to India, you can continue working on movies. If you lose, you come back to the US and you be with us. So I came to India and I started working, and it wasn't very easy because like I've repeatedly said, I had never been to a film set before. The only one time I'd been to a film set was when I was probably about 10 years old, when my dad took me to a film shoot that was happening in Mysore. So the first day I'm shooting, there are like 100, 150 people that are waiting for my instructions, and I'm not at all familiar with a lot of terms that they use. And there is production manager, there is production boys, so I would get confused with everything. And then my associate director comes to me and he says, "Sir, we don't have the clapboard." So I said, "Okay, fine, so who's supposed to get it?" He said, "Direction department." "Okay, ask them to get it." So we are the direction department. I said, "You know what, I don't need a clapboard." So, that guy, poor guy, he somehow came up with something that looked close to a clapboard, and we did the first shot. But I ended up shooting the entire film without a clapboard. And because I had to show that, I don't need a clapboard. It's a different thing that, clapboards are obsolete these days, and I still don't use it. I didn't use it for my second film either. And a week after we are into production, they asked me for the editing report. I didn't even know we were supposed to take down editing reports. So I said, "You know what, I never use editing reports, it's all in my head." And now, even in my second film, I never use my editing report. So this is how I started working, but I was a quick learner. So I started working on the film, I started learning their terms, I started learning what an editing report is. Basically, I knew how to make a film, but I didn't know, the kind of technical terms that were associated with it. So I learned as on the job, and but this was kind of the on-location hurdles. But off-location, I had to face bigger hurdles because, my wife was in the US and I was shooting in an area that did not have cell phone reception at all. So we used to shoot from morning 6 o'clock till around 2:30 in the night. And one day I come back from shoot at 3 o'clock, we come back to the resort, and my dad comes up to me and he says, "Your wife is trying to reach you, she's in tears." But he gave me his phone and he said, "You walk up the hill, you'll get reception there." So I had to walk up a hill at 3 o'clock in the night in the middle of a forest, and I waited for my wife to call because we didn't have international calling on our phones. So my wife calls and she says, "You know what, my visa, there's some issue with it, and my daughter was born in the US. So now, I may have to come back to India, and she doesn't have a visa or a PIO card." So she was pretty desperate because, we didn't know how to get my daughter back. So every day, 6 in the morning, shoot starts, 2:30 in the night, shoot ends, 3 o'clock in the morning, I'm on top of the hill trying to figure out what to do. So this went on for so long. I was totally stressed out. One day I still remember I'm standing on top of the hill all alone. It's pitch dark, there's total silence, and I'm like, what am I doing? I mean, did I do the right thing? I had a job that paid me really well, and I had a happy family back in the US. I've left everything. I'm, staying in the middle of the forest here. I don't know. I've just finished 25% of my film. I don't know if I'll be able to finish this film. So there were a lot of questions. But, there are some things, on a film set, miracles happen. You kind of get the right shot and the whole perspective changes. So we started getting a good shot after a good shot, and then finally we took 45 days to finish the whole shoot. But those 45 days to finish that, it took me 2 years. Because filmmaking, you have date issues, you have location issues, you have weather issues. So finally we finished the film, and now was the toughest part. Now, shooting a film, if you think is difficult, releasing a film with newcomers is almost close to impossible, because nobody wants to buy your film, and they have this, conviction that only certain kind of films work. So my film didn't fall into that category. So my film was not a film that was supposed to work. The posters didn't look appealing. So, a lot of such things came against us, and then finally we were able to find a distributor who was ready to release the film. So it took us 5 months just to get the release date. So finally we got the release date, which was July 3rd, 2015. We released the film on the first day. I still remember, I used to get, some Facebook messages here and there saying that best of luck. People who had seen the trailer, very few. So I would respond to them personally. On the day of the release, 10:30 in the morning, we have a premiere in Kapali Theatre, Bangalore. I get a message from this girl. I open it, and she has wished me best of luck. And after 30 minutes, because I had not responded, she said, you know what, go to hell, your film should fail. And I was like, what did I do to this lady? So I just politely responded, thank you for your wishes, sorry for the delay in responding. And we were going in 2 cars, and suddenly my car had a flat tire. And I was like, shit, this is bad luck, this is not good. And I got down from the car, I asked my friend to get it fixed. I took the other car, we went to the theatre. So the first show started, and when the show started, I was so nervous, because all I could think was, I think I may have to go back to US now, because this is not going to work. So I'm standing, I did not sit throughout the show. I was standing at the back trying to figure out whether people are liking it or not, and I had no idea what was happening. The premiere got over, I came out, I was waiting for people to come out, and people are coming out, and I don't see a very good reaction from them. So people who come out, and I asked them, so what did you think, how was the film? So they're like, yeah, you know what, you might win some awards, people might appreciate your film, but you may not even recover the poster cost. So I was pretty shocked. I mean, I had expected at least, it's pretty decent. And then I kind of collapsed onto a bench that was in front of me, and I just sat there the whole evening. And people kept coming to me, and maybe you should have done this, maybe you should have done that. So I thought, the movie's pretty much gone. But I had some hope. I thought, maybe the next day the newspapers would have good reviews, and maybe it'll all work out. I got up in the morning, saw the newspapers. I was shattered, because they were favorable reviews, but the first line would always start with some negativity. And then there were 2 reviews which ripped apart the film. And I told my brother, what, we were supposed to go for theatre visits. I told my brother, what, I don't have the strength, you go. I'll just stay here. So he went, and what he did was, he used to go and go to multiplexes. They did not even put up our posters, our names would not be on the display. So he would go to people standing in the line and say, this is our trailer, please do watch this film, I'll be waiting outside, if you don't like the film, I'll refund your money. So he did that, and I was sitting at home. He calls me sometime in the afternoon, and he says, you know what, people are liking the film, we're having houseful shows. And then I open Book My Show, I start seeing reds. So in Book My Show, as you know, if it is red, it's getting full. So I see reds, and then suddenly I see open social media, people are talking about the film. So suddenly it became, a rage, and people were like flocking into the theatres. And by the end of the weekend, the first day collection was 20%, the next 2 days it was 100%. So we, were looking at all these big films that were releasing, and planned our release in order to, in such a way that we avoided all the big releases. And then came the biggest release. Bahubali released on July 10th. And we were kicked out of almost every theatre. So now this was shocking because the movie was doing well, and although I'm not a fanatic, we are in Karnataka. It's a Kannada film which is doing really well, and it was being kicked out for a film that's from a different state, and we couldn't take it. I mean, we went to the Information Broadcast Ministry. My dad, me, and we all spoke to them. We said, this is not good because we have 98% collections. So how can they, kick us out of the theaters? This is not fair. We had a press meet, and finally, although the numbers were drastically reduced, we were able to retain at least 20 theaters for the next week. But somehow, the people, I should really thank the audience here because they really came forward and they supported wholeheartedly, and that resulted in the movie really gaining momentum from the third week onwards. And we had houseful shows almost, I think, until the 15th week. In fact, I never felt that we had succeeded because we faced so many hurdles that we could never enjoy the success. And the real success I could enjoy only when we released it overseas. So I was on call while all these things were happening. I was on call for like 12 hours a day, trying to figure out how to release this movie overseas, because until then Kannada movies would see only weekend releases. So I wanted to release it like a proper Hollywood film, a week-long release where the movie runs the whole week and we get like 4 or 5 shows in a multiplex. So we tried this, and we were able to do it because of my distributors in the US and Europe. We were able to get that kind of a release. And when the movie released, we traveled to the US. So I'm in the airport in transit. I think I was in Dubai. I got a call from a friend. He said, "Is it true that your movie collected $30,000 on day one?" I said, "You must be kidding. I mean, no movie has ever collected that in its lifetime, so it's impossible." So I called my distributor. He said, "Yeah, it's true, and in the next 2 days, it's going to double, triple." So I went to US, I landed in San Jose, and what I expected was there'll be like 5-10 people standing there shaking hands and saying, "Yeah, well done, good movie." But when we landed there, it was almost as if I'm standing in KG Road, Bangalore, because the line was, for as far as I could see people there standing in line to buy tickets for Rangitaranga. And this was a shock for us because that theater alone had 17 continuous houseful shows. And we never thought that there were so many people who were watching who wanted to watch Kannada movies in the US. So this was pretty huge for us, and all over the US, eventually we ended up collecting about $318,000 in the US, which is still a record for a Kannada film. And we were the first film to make it to the New York box office list. So we were 27th on the week we released. This includes all the Hollywood movies, Bollywood movies, and everything. So which was a huge thing for us. And eventually I went on to win a lot of awards for the film. I got Best Music Director, Best Lyricist, IFA, and then Filmfare, SAIMA, State Award. So we won a lot of awards. So on the day before the release, I still remember thinking that, if I get the movie to run for 25 days, I'll be the luckiest person. But the movie went on to run for a year in the theaters. So like I said, I have worked really, whatever little success I've seen in life, I've really worked hard to win. And I've also worked really hard to end up losing very badly. So every time I fall, every time I lose, the one thing that keeps me going is, I always try to remember the tilting doll. Adisi nodu, bidisi nodu, uruli hogodu. Thank you.